Aubrey Hall never imagined her life would shatter in a single night, but the moment Damian Blackwood stepped into their penthouse overlooking Manhattan, she felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. The city lights glittered behind him like cold shards of glass, and the air shifted sharp, heavy, warning her that something was terribly wrong. She had spent the entire afternoon rehearsing how to tell him, hoping he would smile, maybe pull her into his arms the way he used to in their first months together. Instead, he barely looked at her as he loosened his tie, tossed his Mont Blanc pen on the marble counter, and checked his phone like she wasn't even there. She swallowed, hands trembling as she held out the small white envelope containing the test results. "Damian, I'm pregnant. Everyone." For a moment, just a blink, his expression softened like a memory of the man she once loved. But then it vanished. His jaw clenched, his eyes chilled, and the silence that followed was so long it felt like the city itself stopped breathing. "Aubrey," he finally said, voice low, clipped, businesslike, like he was discussing quarterly losses, not their child. "Do you understand what this means? Right now? Before the IPO? Before the press tours? Before everything I've built is finally within reach?" Her lips parted. "Damian, it's our baby." But he stepped back as if the word baby contaminated the air. "This is the worst possible timing. Investors don't want a distracted CEO with a pregnant wife. Do you think they'll trust me to lead a multi-billion-dollar company if they see chaos in my personal life?" Chaos. That was what he called their child. Aubrey felt her chest tighten, but she tried to stay steady. "I just thought You didn't think," he cut in sharply. "You should have been more careful." Her breath caught. "So this is my fault?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The weight of his disappointment crushed the room. The penthouse suddenly felt too big, too cold, too hollow for the two of them. Damian paced, muttering to himself about shareholders, optics, reporters, timing. Not once did he say baby. Not once did he say us. And as she stood there, arms wrapped around her stomach, a small protective gesture she didn't fully realize she was making, she felt something inside her break. Then Damian stopped pacing, looked at her with finality, and said the 7 words that carved themselves into her bones. "You know what you have to do." Aubrey froze. No warmth, no hesitation, no humanity. Only command, only expectation. Only a man telling a woman to erase a life so he wouldn't have to face a headline. She whispered, voice cracking, "Damian, please don't make me choose." He turned away, tightening his tie again, as if preparing for war. "I'm not making you choose, Aubrey. I'm telling you the only acceptable decision." The room spun. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. And for the first time, she realized, this wasn't the man she loved. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous. And she had no idea that tonight was only the beginning of the nightmare. The next morning, while the city was still stretching awake under the gray Manhattan sky, Damian Blackwood sat inside the glass-walled boardroom of Blackwood Capital. The room was perched high above Park Avenue, the skyline glittering beneath him like trophies he already believed belonged to him. His executives gathered around the sleek marble table, but his mind wasn't on the agenda. It was on Aubrey. On the pregnancy. On the threat he believed she had become. He didn't see a baby. He saw a liability. Fiona Crest, his impeccably styled director of communications, entered late, heels clicking sharply against the floor. She sat next to him with the ease of someone who knew she had influence. Her perfume drifted toward him, subtle but calculated. "You look tense," she whispered, glancing at him with that familiar mix of curiosity and ambition. Damian slid a folder toward her financial projections for the upcoming IPO, but she noticed the way his jaw clenched, the way his fingers drummed on the polished table. Something was off. "What happened?" she murmured. He exhaled slowly. "A situation. At home. Is it going to affect the roadshow?" she asked immediately, not bothering to hide her concern for the company and perhaps for her own ascent within it. Damian hesitated just a fraction too long. Fiona's eyes sharpened. "It's her, isn't it?" "Aubrey." He didn't respond. He didn't have to. Fiona leaned back slightly, assessing him the way a strategist evaluates a battlefield. "Investors are already nervous," she said softly. "Any unexpected distraction could hurt the valuation, especially something domestic." Damian shot her a warning look. "It's under control." "It doesn't sound like it," she replied smoothly. What did she do? Damien's voice dropped. She's pregnant. Fiona blinked once, twice. Then her lips curved into a small, polished smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Well, she said, that is inconvenient. Inconvenient, the same word he had used in his mind all night. He stared at the city beyond the window, the way the morning sun hit the steel buildings, casting long shadows. A pregnancy could crack the pristine image he'd crafted so carefully, the unstoppable visionary, the man too focused, too disciplined, too clean to let personal drama touch him. Investors don't want a family man right now, Fiona continued, flipping through the financials. They want a force, someone untouchable. I know, Damien muttered. And a pregnant wife? She shook her head. It complicates the story we've built. The story we've built. Damien noticed her choice of words. Fiona leaned closer, voice low enough that the others couldn't hear. If you need to manage the situation, now is the time. Before the press catches a whiff. Before the board starts asking questions. Damien looked at her. She held his gaze without flinching. It's your decision, she added. But if you want the IPO to go through clean, you cannot afford surprises. Not from her. A cold certainty settled into Damien's bones. He had spent a decade constructing an empire. He would not let Aubrey or the baby jeopardize it. As the meeting ended, Fiona touched his arm lightly. Handle it quickly, she whispered. For all our sakes. End quote. He didn't pull away. He didn't disagree. Instead, he walked out of the boardroom, already crafting his next move, already preparing the words he would use to corner Aubrey, already turning her into a problem to eliminate. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that this decision would not protect his empire. It would destroy it. And the first crack in his perfect world was about to appear that very afternoon. The restaurant Damien chose that night was one of those dim Manhattan places where the lighting was soft enough to hide aging, and the prices were high enough to keep ordinary people out. Aubrey sat at a small corner table, fingers tracing the edge of a water glass as she waited. The soft murmur of conversation and clinking silverware might have soothed her on another evening, but tonight her stomach twisted with dread. When Damien finally arrived, he didn't greet her with a kiss. He didn't touch her hand. He didn't even ask how she was doing. He simply slid into the seat across from her and opened the menu as if this were a routine business dinner. Aubrey forced herself to speak. Damien, we didn't finish talking last night. I need you to tell me what you're really feeling. He lowered the menu a fraction. What I'm feeling, he said, is disappointment. The words sliced through her. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice cold but controlled. You knew how important this year is for me, for the company, for the IPO, and you still let this happen. Aubrey blinked, stunned. Let, Damien? I didn't do this alone, and it's not something to blame me for. It's our child. End quote. The waiter approached, but Damien dismissed him with a curt wave. His eyes stayed locked on her. Aubrey, he said, a baby right now would ruin everything. Investors don't trust instability. They want a CEO with a perfect image, disciplined, focused, unencumbered. His jaw tightened. A pregnant wife sends the wrong message. Her voice shook. What message? That you're human? That I'm distracted, he snapped. That I can't control my own life. That my judgment is compromised. Thanks for watching. Aubrey felt tears pushing at the edges of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This isn't a PR problem, Damien. It's a child, a life. He exhaled loudly, annoyed she wasn't understanding. Then he reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small envelope, the same kind his lawyers used. The kind that always made her nervous. He slid it across the table. What's this? She whispered. A clinic. Discreet, quick. I scheduled it for Friday morning. You'll go, we'll handle this quietly, and we'll move on. Aubrey stared at him, disbelief crawling up her spine. You? Scheduled it? Without asking me? I'm telling you what needs to be done, he said calmly, as though he were guiding her through a business merger. Her breath caught. Damien, this isn't your decision alone. His eyes hardened. If you keep this baby, Aubrey, you keep it alone. She felt the blood drain from her face. He didn't blink. He didn't hesitate. He didn't care about the devastation washing over her. I'm not losing everything I've built because of your mistake, he continued. Think logically. This baby does not fit into our lives. The words echoed inside her like a heavy door slamming shut. A mistake. That was what he called their child. Aubrey's hands trembled under the table. "I thought you loved me," she whispered. Damien didn't soften. "I love order. I love stability. I love success. And right now, you're threatening all three." For a long moment, they sat there in painful silence, the restaurant's warm lighting suddenly feeling harsh, unforgiving. Then, slowly, Damien pushed back his chair and stood. "Friday morning," he said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." He walked away, not even glancing back. Aubrey sat frozen, staring at the envelope, her breath coming in shallow, shaky waves. Around her, the world went on, couples laughing, glasses clinking, music drifting softly through the air, completely unaware that her life had just been cleaved in two. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the smallest protective gesture growing inside her, and whispered, "I'm so sorry." Because she suddenly realized something terrifying. She might lose Damien, but she might lose her baby too. The following afternoon, the sky hung low and gray over Midtown, as if the city itself sensed what was about to happen. Aubrey sat quietly in the back seat of a cab, hands folded tightly over her purse, staring out the window as buildings blurred past. She barely slept the night before. Her heart felt bruised, swollen, terrified. But she refused to cancel the appointment, not because she intended to obey Damien, but because she owed herself clarity, and she needed to hear the truth from someone who wasn't trying to control her. When the cab pulled up to Dr. Karen Wolf's clinic, Aubrey hesitated before stepping out. The building was small and warm-looking, tucked between two towering glass structures like a fragile secret the city tried to hide. She walked inside, the quiet hum of soft music greeting her, the scent of lavender drifting gently through the air. Karen entered moments later, a folder in hand, eyes soft with concern. "Aubrey," she said gently, "you look exhausted." Before Aubrey could respond, the clinic door swung open with a sharp gust of cold air. Damien. He filled the doorway like a storm, expensive suit, immaculate, expression carved in stone. He didn't greet her. He didn't ask if she was okay. He simply stepped forward as though he owned the room. "Let's get this done," he said. Karen's eyes flicked between them, narrowing slightly. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "your wife didn't mention you would be joining." "I'm here because she needs support," he replied smoothly. "And guidance." Aubrey's stomach tightened. She knew what he meant. Control, pressure, manipulation. Karen motioned for Aubrey to sit on the exam table, but Damien answered every question directed at Aubrey about symptoms, timing, even emotional readiness. "Mr. Blackwood," Karen interrupted, voice calm but firm. "I need to speak with Aubrey alone." "If you manx of one," Damien stiffened. "That's unnecessary." "It's protocol," Karen said evenly. After a tense silence, he stepped out, but not without a warning glare aimed at Aubrey. When the door closed, Karen drew closer. "Aubrey," she said softly, "are you here because you want this procedure, or because you're afraid of the consequences if you don't?" That single question cracked something inside her. The tears she'd been holding back for days brimmed instantly. "I don't want to lose my baby," she whispered. "But he said he'd leave me. He said I'd be on my own. He said everything was my fault." Karen placed a comforting hand on her arm. "Nothing about this is your fault. And no one has the right to force you into a decision you don't want to make." Aubrey broke. A quiet sob escaped her, shoulders trembling. Karen handed her a tissue. "Listen to me carefully. If you choose to continue this pregnancy, you will not be alone. I can help you. But you need to understand, he cannot know your plans until you are safe." Aubrey swallowed hard. "Safe?" Karen nodded. "Men who use control as a weapon don't lose gracefully." At that moment, the exam room door rattled. Damien, impatient, knocking hard. Karen lowered her voice. "Whatever you choose, I'll stand with you. But you must decide for yourself, not for him." Aubrey inhaled shakily, finally finding a sliver of strength inside the fear. "Karen," she whispered, "I want to keep my baby." Karen squeezed her hand. "Then that's what we're going to do." The door swung open again. Damien stepped inside with forced calm, eyes sharp as glass. "Well," he demanded, "is she ready?" Aubrey raised her head, tears drying on her cheeks. But before she could speak, Karen stepped in front of her, blocking Damien. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "we need to talk outside. Thank you for watching." Damien followed Karen into the hallway with stiff, controlled steps, the kind a man took when he felt his authority slipping. The door closed behind them, leaving Aubrey alone in the exam room, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear. In the hallway, Karen crossed her arms. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to make something clear. The decision is Aubrey's, not yours." Damien's eyes hardened. "She's emotional. You need to guide her, not indulge her panic." Karen didn't flinch. "What I see isn't panic, it's fear. Fear of losing her marriage. Fear of your reaction. Fear of what you'll do if she chooses differently than you want." He scoffed. "Don't dramatize this. She told me you threatened to leave her," Karen said quietly, "that you'd make her raise the baby alone." Damien's jaw clenched. "I told her the truth. She knows what's at stake. I'm not sacrificing my career because she was careless." Karen took a slow breath. A pregnancy is not carelessness, and coercing someone into a medical procedure is abuse. The word hit him like a slap. He stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. "Choose your next words carefully, doctor. I don't tolerate being accused of things I haven't done." "But you have," she said calmly. "You booked an appointment without her consent. You told her what she has to do. And you're trying to use your power to corner her." Damien's nostrils flared. "This discussion is over. I can't." He turned toward the exam room, but Karen moved in front of him. "No," she said, blocking his path. "Until Aubrey feels safe, you're not going back in there." His voice grew icy. "I could destroy you." "Then you'll have to start now," she replied evenly, "because I'm not letting you manipulate her inside my clinic." For a long, tense moment, the two of them stood in a silent standoff. The powerful CEO, accustomed to obedience, and the doctor, who refused to fear him. Finally, Damien stepped back, forcing a tight smile. "Fine, play the hero, but she and I will finish this conversation at home." Karen didn't respond. She simply opened the door and returned to Aubrey, leaving him in the hallway like a storm waiting to break. Inside, Aubrey looked up immediately. "Is he angry?" Karen sat beside her. "Aubrey, you are not safe with him if you don't follow his demands. You need to think about where you can go, who you can trust." Aubrey swallowed. The answer was heartbreaking. No one. Karen placed a hand over hers. "Then you'll trust me. I'll help you. But you need to be ready. If you want to keep your baby, you cannot stay under his roof. Not one more night." The weight of those words crushed into Aubrey. Leaving Damien meant losing everything familiar: her home, her stability, the life she thought she was building. But staying meant losing her child. And that was no choice at all. The exam room door suddenly burst open. Damien strode in, expression chillingly calm. "We're leaving," he said, as if the matter were settled. Aubrey didn't move. He stared at her, a calculated look, cold and final. "Aubrey, get up." Her hands shook, but she lifted her chin. "No." His eyes darkened, the temperature in the room dropping instantly. "What did she tell you?" he demanded. Aubrey's voice trembled, but she held her ground. "The truth." Damien stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think she'll protect you from me? You think you can do this without consequences?" Aubrey's breath caught. Karen moved between them again. "Mr. Blackwood, you need to leave now." He glared at both women, the mask slipping for the first time, revealing the fury beneath the polished exterior. Then he said, voice barely above a whisper, "Aubrey, if you walk away from me, I will make sure you regret it." And for. The sun had already dipped behind the skyline by the time Aubrey reached their penthouse. The city lights flickered to life, glowing like 1,000 indifferent witnesses. She stepped inside quietly, half expecting Damien to be waiting, ready to argue, ready to command, ready to break her again. But the apartment was silent, too silent. His absence didn't bring relief, it brought a deeper, colder dread. Because if Damien wasn't home, it meant he was planning, calculating, preparing whatever punishment he believed she deserved. Her hands shook as she walked through the living room, past the floor-to-ceiling windows where Manhattan glittered below. This had once felt magical, a future she couldn't believe she was living. Now it felt like a cage made of glass and money, one crack away from shattering around her. She went to the bedroom and opened the closet, pulling down a small suitcase. Just touching it made her heart race. Leaving felt like betraying the life she thought she wanted, the marriage she tried so hard to keep alive. But staying meant risking everything she was starting to love more than Damien. Her baby. She opened the drawer where she kept the ultrasound pictures. The tiny bean-shaped outline stared back at her, impossibly fragile. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I'm not letting him take you from me. He's as weather-savin'." She packed quickly, 2 changes of clothes, essentials, her passport. She grabbed her laptop and the envelope with her savings. But when she reached for her phone, she froze. Damien tracked everything. GPS, banking, cloud backups. He had insisted on shared transparency, but now she understood it was control. She set the phone down, heart pounding. Without it, she'd be harder to trace. He couldn't follow her calls, her location, her searches. But it also meant she'd be leaving behind the last tie to her old life. She zipped the suitcase, then glanced around the penthouse, its marble floors, the modern furniture, the cold luxury that had once impressed her. On the counter sat the Cartier bracelet he'd given her months earlier. She slipped it off her wrist and set it beside the fruit bowl. "No more pretending," she whispered. As she reached the door, something stopped her. Footsteps. The elevator down the hall. A familiar rhythm. Damien. Panic surged through her. She darted back into the kitchen, flicked off the lights, and hid behind the island as the elevator dinged. The lock clicked. The door opened. "Aubrey?" His voice echoed calm, too calm. "We're not done talking." His shoes tapped slowly on the hardwood floor. He wasn't calling out lovingly, he was hunting. She held her breath, crouching lower, gripping the suitcase handle so tightly her fingers went numb. "Aubrey," he said again, voice colder now. "Don't make this worse than it already is." He walked past the kitchen, heading toward the bedroom. She could hear drawers opening, doors swinging. This was her chance. With shaking legs, she slipped out from her hiding spot, crept to the front door, and eased it open, just an inch, then another. The hallway was empty. Her heart hammered as she stepped out, pulling the door closed behind her without a sound. She didn't run until she reached the elevator. When the door slid shut, she saw her reflection pale, terrified, but determined. As the elevator descended, her breath came in sharp gasps. She was leaving her life, leaving her marriage, leaving everything she thought she knew. But she wasn't leaving alone, because inside her, a heartbeat was counting on her to escape. When she reached the street, she raised her hand for a cab, only for her phone in the pocket to buzz. A message from Damien, just 2 words. "Turn around." Aubrey didn't look back when the cab pulled away from the curb. She kept her eyes fixed on the blurry glow of traffic lights streaking across the window, fighting the urge to collapse. Every muscle in her body trembled, every instinct screamed danger. But she stayed quiet, focused on breathing, on holding herself together long enough to get somewhere safe. "Where to?" the cab driver asked gently. Aubrey hesitated. She couldn't go to her office. Damien would find her. She couldn't go to a friend's place. She had none close enough to trust with something this dangerous. She opened her purse and pulled out the card Karen had slipped her earlier. A handwritten number, a different clinic address, a whispered promise. "Call if you decide to choose yourself." "Penn Station," she finally said. "Please." The driver nodded. As the cab merged into traffic, her phone lit up again with Damien's name. Her stomach twisted. She powered the phone off completely and dropped it into her purse. She couldn't afford even a trace. The moment the train pulled out of Manhattan and the skyline faded into the darkness, Aubrey exhaled for the first time in hours. It felt like morning and relief tangled together. She clutched her suitcase and leaned her forehead against the cold window. She wasn't running from her marriage. She was running toward her baby. 2 days later, after switching trains twice and paying cash for a third, she arrived in Portland, Oregon, a place she'd never been. Chosen solely because it was far, anonymous, and quiet enough for her mind to stop screaming. Karen had arranged a temporary room for her at a women's shelter, hidden from any searchable directory. The staff offered her warm soup, clean sheets, and a place to breathe. When they asked her name, she almost said Aubrey Blackwood, but the word caught. She swallowed. Aubrey Hall. Her maiden name felt like stepping back into herself. In the mornings, she walked to the nearby community clinic where Karen had coordinated a safe prenatal appointment. The nurse there called her sweetheart and brought her warm tea. For the first time since the ultrasound, someone spoke to her as if her pregnancy was something precious, not a scandal. At night, She sat on the shelter's small patio, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, staring at the moon. She rested her hands on her belly and whispered, "I don't know how to do this, but I'll try. I promise, I'll try." The baby kicked faintly one evening, just a flutter, barely there, but it was enough to make her cry. Then, one afternoon, as she walked out of the clinic with her medical folders tucked inside her coat, she stopped cold. Across the street, a black sedan idled at the corner. Her pulse thudded violently. The windows were tinted. The car didn't move. And though she couldn't see inside, a horrible certainty crawled up her spine. Damien had resources, teams, investigators, and connections in every major city. Her breath hitched. Was it him? Had he found her? She stepped behind a lamppost, waiting, heart hammering in her ears. A moment later, the sedan pulled away slowly, disappearing into traffic. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was paranoia. But deep down, she knew better. Because just before the car turned the corner, she glimpsed something unmistakable through the windshield. A familiar silhouette. A familiar posture. A familiar way of holding a phone. Her blood ran cold. Damien was closing in. Aubrey's days in Oregon passed slowly at first, each one shaped by fear, exhaustion, and the constant dread of Damien's shadow creeping closer. But something else was growing to strength. A quiet, trembling strength she didn't recognize yet, but it was there, forming with every heartbeat of the tiny life inside her. By her 7th month, she had moved from the shelter into a small rented room above a retired seamstress's home. The wallpaper was peeling, the heater whined at night, and the mattress sagged in the middle. But for the first time in years, Aubrey felt a strange kind of peace. No one demanded anything from her. No one watched her every move. She walked to the community market each morning, bought fruit with cash, and spent afternoons knitting a tiny blue hat she wasn't sure she'd finish. But the fear never disappeared entirely. Some nights she woke to the distant rumble of a car and her heart seized, convinced Damien had found her. Every unfamiliar face made her flinch. Every phone ringing in the house made her stomach twist. Karen had warned her, men like him don't accept no. Not when they're used to possessing everything. Thanks for watching. Still, Aubrey tried to build a routine to believe she could carve out a corner of the world where Damien didn't own her. Then, one storm-heavy night, her water broke. It happened suddenly, one sharp pain, then another, her hand bracing against the hallway wall as panic surged through her. Her landlady called an ambulance immediately, her voice calm and steady even as lightning cracked outside. The small-town hospital smelled of lemon disinfectant and old radiator heat. Nurses guided Aubrey into a dim room, whispering, encouraging words. A young nurse with freckles squeezed her hand. "You're safe here," she said. "Just breathe, sweetheart." But safety wasn't something Aubrey trusted anymore. Hours blurred into flashes of pain, whispers of names, the pounding of her pulse in her ears. And then, like the world paused, a single newborn cry broke through the storm. Her son, her baby. They laid him on her chest, skin warm, tiny fingers curling instinctively toward her. Aubrey felt something inside her crack, open a kind of love she didn't know was possible, fierce and terrified and infinite. She touched his cheek. "Liam," she whispered. "My Liam." He quieted, as if he knew her voice already. But the moment didn't last. A nurse asked gently, "Will the father be joining us?" Aubrey froze. Memories rushed in the coldness in Damien's eyes, the threats, the envelope on the dinner table. She shook her head, clutching Liam closer. "No, it's just us." Later, when the paperwork came, she stared at the line, asking for the father's name. She hovered the pen over the space. Blackwood. That name could buy him privilege, connections, opportunities. But it could also chain him to a man who saw him as an inconvenience. Aubrey swallowed hard and wrote, Liam Hall. Her name, her identity, her protection. That night, after feeding him and rocking him until his tiny face relaxed into sleep, she made a vow, silent but unbreakable. "I will never let him hurt you. I will never let him find you, not until I'm strong enough to fight back." Thunder rolled outside. Rain streaked across the hospital window like questions she didn't yet have answers to. But for now, she had Liam. And that was enough. The next morning, as sunlight touched the edge of her bed, a nurse entered holding a clipboard. "There's someone asking for you at the front desk," she said softly. He won't give his name, but he insists it's urgent. Aubrey felt her heart stop. Because some storms don't end when the rain does. Aubrey didn't move when the nurse told her someone was waiting. Her fingers tightened around the blanket wrapped around Liam's tiny body. Her heart hammered so loudly she barely heard her own voice when she whispered, "What did he look like?" The nurse hesitated. Tall, maybe early 30s, dark coat. He said he's a friend. Aubrey's blood ran cold. Damien would never call himself a friend. Her pulse clattered as she imagined him standing in the lobby, impatient, furious, calculating how to rip Liam from her arms. She wasn't ready. She couldn't fight him yet. Not here. Not while her body was still shaking from labor and her son was barely hours old. She forced herself to breathe. "Can you tell him I'm unavailable?" "I already did," the nurse said. "He said he'll wait." Aubrey's stomach twisted. She pulled on the loose sweater that hung by the chair, tucked Liam against her chest, and shuffled slowly toward the door. Her legs felt unsteady, each step a battle between courage and terror. When she reached the end of the hallway and peered around the corner toward the waiting area, she braced herself for the sharp, cold outline of Damien Blackwood. Instead, she froze. It wasn't Damien. It was a man she hadn't seen in years, someone from a life she had almost forgotten. Ethan Miller. He stood from the plastic chair when he spotted her, shock flickering across his face. His hair was longer, his jaw sharper, but the familiar gentleness in his eyes hadn't changed. "Aubrey?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "My God, is that your baby?" She stiffened instinctively, stepping half a pace back. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He lifted his hands slightly, palms outward. Not threatening, not prying, just present. "I got a call from Dr. Wolf. She said you might need help. She didn't tell me why, but, Aubrey, when she said your name after all these years, I came as fast as I could." Aubrey blinked, confused. Karen had never mentioned calling anyone. "She said you had no one," Ethan added softly. "And no one deserves to go through this alone." For the first time, Aubrey felt something shift inside her relief, thin as a thread but real. Still, fear held her tightly. "Ethan, I can't involve anyone. It's not safe." His gaze lowered to Liam. "Is his father the reason you're running?" Her throat tightened. "Please don't ask." He nodded. "Okay." No pressure, no judgment, just unconditional acceptance, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Ethan," she whispered, "if he finds us." "He won't," he said immediately. "Not if I can help it." She almost laughed, broken, grateful. "You don't know who he is." "I don't need to," Ethan replied. "I know who you are, and that's enough for me." Those words nearly sent her to her knees. They sat in a quiet corner of the waiting room. She told him only fragments: fear, escape, the baby, the need to stay hidden. Ethan didn't push for more. He simply let her speak until her shoulders loosened slightly and her breathing steadied. Ethan worked in tech now, he explained. Cybersecurity, systems architecture, exactly the kind of skills she desperately needed if she wanted to disappear for real. When he realized that, he said, "Aubrey, if you want a new life, I can build you one. Clean identity, secure accounts, a path forward." Aubrey stared at him, stunned. Hope small, trembling sparked inside her. But just as she opened her mouth to respond, the hospital's front doors slid open with a sharp hiss. A familiar figure stepped inside. This time, it was Damien. He scanned the room slowly, methodically, hunting. Ethan saw her face pale and whispered, "Aubrey, tell me that's not him." She clutched Liam to her chest, heart stuttering. "It is," she breathed, "and he can't see us." Things for watch. The snow had already begun falling over Portland by the time Aubrey made it safely out the back entrance of the hospital. Ethan led the way, carrying her suitcase while she held Liam close beneath her coat. The cold bit at her skin, but fear burned hotter. Behind them, somewhere in that building, Damien was tearing through the halls, demanding answers, threatening staff, searching for the woman who dared defy him. They reached Ethan's car, an older blue Subaru with scratches on the bumper, humble, worn, and suddenly the safest thing Aubrey had seen in months. Ethan opened the door for her. "Get in. Keep your head down." She didn't need convincing. As they pulled away, Aubrey looked back at the hospital one last time. Through the windows, She thought she saw movement shadows crossing the lobby, a figure stepping outside under the overhang. Damien. Her breath trembled. Ethan noticed and spoke softly. He won't catch you tonight, I promise. The years after Liam's birth blurred into a long, exhausting climb. Ethan helped her secure a new identity, nothing illegal, just careful privacy layers, protected accounts, and digital footprints washed clean. He networked quietly to find her odd jobs in bookkeeping and data entry, all remote, all paid in small deposits across multiple accounts, so nothing traced back easily. Aubrey worked at night while Liam slept in a thrift store crib that creaked if he rolled too far to one side. Her days were a haze of formula bottles, crying spells, learning how to swaddle, and moments of pure, overwhelming love she didn't know how to hold all at once. She cried sometimes when the heater died on a winter night, when she couldn't afford a doctor visit, when a stranger's face looked too much like Damien's, and panic clawed at her chest. But Ethan showed up sometimes with takeout, sometimes with code to make her accounts even more secure, sometimes simply with a steady, grounding presence. You're strong, he would tell her. She never believed it then. But life forced her to become it. By the time Liam turned 3, Aubrey had built a reputation as a reliable remote financial analyst, quiet, precise, invisible enough to feel safe. Ethan, now working as a lead engineer at a Bay Area tech firm, visited Portland regularly. With every visit, he brought more than help, he brought a sense of future. One rainy evening, he showed up with an old MacBook Pro under his arm. I think it's time we start something, he said. Aubrey blinked. Start what? A company, Ethan said simply. A platform that teaches normal people how money actually works. Transparent, honest, everything the Wall Street guys aren't. She hesitated. Ethan, I can barely keep my head above water. I have Liam. I can't risk. You won't risk anything, he said softly. We'll build slowly, quietly, legally, safely. I'll handle the tech, you handle the numbers, and we'll create something Damien can never touch. The thought shook her. Not revenge. Not power. Freedom. They worked from coffee shops, from her small kitchen table, from public libraries with flickering fluorescent lights. Liam played with crayons at their feet while they drafted user flowcharts and financial modules. Every month, the project grew one line of code, one spreadsheet, one tiny win at a time. 3 years later, it had a name. Bluestone Finance. And people started noticing. A finance podcast. A small blog. A local business article calling her the invisible brain behind the platform. Aubrey Hall, someone Damien tried to erase, was building something real. Then, one morning, as she reviewed new user analytics, her email pinged. Subject line, Blackwood Capital Inquiry. Urgent. Her lungs tightened. Ethan leaned over her shoulder. Aubrey, what is it? She opened the message slowly, dread rising like a tide. Because inside was a name she thought she'd escaped forever. Damien Blackwood. Blackwood Capital Tower stood over Manhattan like a monument to ambition, steel, glass, and a legacy Damien Blackwood believed nothing could touch. But empires seldom crumble with explosions. More often, they rot quietly from within. And Damien was too consumed by control to notice the cracks spreading beneath his feet. The boardroom lights glowed against the polished table as Damien flipped through quarterly reports with irritation tightening every muscle in his jaw. The numbers weren't bad, not yet, but they were shifting. Investors were stalling, regulators were poking, and most dangerously, someone had begun circulating questions about the legitimacy of Blackwood Capital's most profitable financial products. He slammed the folder shut. Who leaked this? He demanded. Around the table, the executives exchanged nervous glances. Fiona Crest, ever composed in her tailored cream suit, stepped forward. There's chatter online, she said. A new platform, Bluestone Finance, is calling out predatory lending structures. Some of their examples look familiar. Damien's expression sharpened. Familiar how? Fiona hesitated. Familiar as in ours. A cold spike of anger sliced through him. Who runs it? Her silence stretched too long. Fiona, Damien pressed, voice darkening. I asked you a question. She swallowed. We're still checking, but the numbers are growing fast. Their user platform is gaining traction. And she glanced nervously at the large wall screen showing social media analytics. Someone on the board flagged the name Aubrey Hall. It felt like a punch to the gut. Damien straightened slowly, every bone suddenly cold. "What did you say?" "Aubrey Hall," Fiona repeated, voice barely above a whisper. "Her signature is on some of the educational modules. She must be consulting, possibly leading the financial framework." For a moment, Damien couldn't process it. Aubrey? His Aubrey, the quiet, obedient wife who didn't understand the world of sharks and strategy, building something capable of undercutting him? It was impossible. Except it wasn't. He felt heat rise to his face, anger curling through him like fire creeping under a locked door. "Find everything," he said. "Where she is, who she works with, who funds her. I want every detail." Fiona nodded, but her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe something else entirely. Damien turned away, staring out the massive window overlooking the city he believed he owned. He had built this empire brick by brick through charisma, calculation, and ruthlessness. He had sacrificed being gentle, being honest, being human, all in service of success. But there was one thing he thought he never needed to worry about. Aubrey. She was supposed to fade away, just another closed chapter. He had convinced himself she would crumble without him, that she was too fragile to survive the world alone, that she would never fight back. Yet here she was creating waves big enough to shake his tower. He gripped the railing, knuckles whitening. "What else?" he muttered. Fiona exhaled softly. "The investors have concerns about your personal reputation." "My reputation is impeccable. For now," she emphasized. "But the whispers about your marriage, your wife's disappearance, they're resurfacing." Damien snapped his gaze toward her. "Handle it." "I'm trying," she said through tight lips. "But secrets don't stay buried forever." The word struck a nerve so deep he nearly flinched. Secrets. Buried. Forever. He turned back to the skyline, pulse drumming violently. "She won't ruin this for me." Fiona watched him quietly, unreadable. "And if she tries?" she asked softly. Damien's voice dropped to a chilling calm. "She'll regret it." Suddenly, one of the analysts rushed into the room, pale as paper. "Sir, there's something new. Bluestone Finance just released a video. The woman presenting, it's her." Damien's heartbeat stalled. "Aubrey?" he demanded. The analyst nodded. "And sir," he swallowed, "there's a child with her." Damien froze. A child. A chill slid down his spine. "Show me," he ordered, because somewhere inside him, a terrifying suspicion had begun to form. The Beverly Hills Grand Summit shimmered under golden spotlights, its marble floors reflecting the glow of wealth and ambition. This was where titans of finance gathered each year, where deals worth billions were born and reputations were destroyed in a single careless moment. Damien Blackwood had attended every year since Blackwood Capital's rise, always as the star, always as the man everyone wanted FaceTime with. But this year, something felt different. He sensed it the moment he stepped through the revolving doors. Conversations hushed quicker. Handshakes lingered awkwardly. Eyes darted toward him, then away. Rumors, he thought. Investors were spooked. Perhaps by the regulators, perhaps by Bluestone Finance, perhaps by a rumor he hadn't yet heard. He tightened his tie and strode deeper into the lobby, projecting dominance. The room would bend to him. It always had. Across the lobby, a child's laughter broke the tension, a small, bright sound cutting through the cold hum of adult ambition. Damien glanced toward the source almost absently, and then he froze. A little boy, maybe 6 or 7, was sitting on a polished velvet bench, swinging his legs as he tapped on an iPad. He had a shock of dark hair, a familiar furrow in his brow, and an expression Damien had seen before, reflected back at him when he was a child. Something unsettling twisted inside him. What a strange coincidence. But before he could process the thought, a woman walked into view. Aubrey. She bent down to adjust the boy's scarf, her movements tender, natural, protective. Her hair was longer now, softer, her posture stronger than he remembered. She looked nothing like the frightened woman he once controlled. She radiated something he had never allowed her to own. Confidence? Damien's breath caught in his throat. It had been years since he last saw her, yet the shock hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't hiding in some broken apartment. She wasn't ruined or desperate. She was here among CEOs, investors, journalists, moving with quiet purpose. His world tilted. Fiona approached him from behind, unreadable expression tight on her face. "Damien, what is it?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. Because in that moment, the boy looked up. Their eyes met Damien's and the child's. Same dark irises. Same sharp gaze. Same unmistakable shape. No. Impossible. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Who is that?" he whispered, barely able to speak. Fiona followed his line of sight. She stiffened. "Wait, is that?" But Damien was already moving. His steps quickened as Aubrey lifted the boy's hand and began guiding him toward the escalators. Her eyes lifted briefly and collided with his. The blood drained from her face. Her grip tightened around the child. Damien closed the distance. "Aubrey." She flinched as if struck. He stepped in front of her, blocking their path. His voice trembled not with fear, but with disbelief. "Is that your son?" Aubrey's throat worked, her breath sharp. "Please move." Inesma. Damien stared at the boy, unable to tear his gaze away. A terrifying, electrifying reality flashed through him. His voice cracked. "Aubrey, whose child is he?" Her jaw clenched. "He's mine." "And his father?" Damien pressed, desperation creeping in. Aubrey's eyes burned not with fear now, but with the fury of a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. She stepped closer, her voice low. "He's none of your concern." Damien felt the floor tilt. "Aubrey, answer me." End quote. She took Liam's hand, shielding him behind her. "No." That single word sliced through him more deeply than any lawsuit, any scandal, any financial blow he had ever faced. Before he could speak again, Ethan appeared at the top of the escalator, calling softly, "Aubrey, everything okay?" Damien's blood went cold. Ethan. With her. With the boy? And in that moment, Damien understood something horrifying. Aubrey hadn't just escaped him. She had built a new life without him. The air in the Beverly Hills Grand Summit felt suddenly too thick, too warm, too loud. Aubrey could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears as Damien Blackwood stood inches away, staring at Liam as though the ground beneath him had cracked open. For years, she had imagined this moment, the moment their worlds collided again, but she had hoped it would never happen. Not like this. Not with Liam looking up, innocent and curious, unaware of the storm building around him. "Is he yours?" Damien demanded, his voice rough, stripped of its usual practiced charm. Aubrey positioned Liam behind her, her hand protective against his small back. "I said move, Damien." He stepped closer, eyes flicking between her and the boy. "Aubrey, look at him. He looks exactly." "That doesn't concern you," she snapped. People were starting to notice. Two investors slowed their steps. A journalist lifted her head. Fiona Crest watched from across the lobby, tension gathering in her posture, her eyes narrowing with predatory interest. Damien lowered his voice, but the intensity only sharpened. "Tell me the truth. Is that my son?" And her stomach twisted. She wasn't afraid of him the way she used to be, but she was terrified of the damage he could still do. To Liam. To the life she'd fought to build. To the fragile freedom she'd carved from nothing. Before she could answer, Ethan descended the escalator, instantly reading the tension. "Aubrey?" he called, stepping forward with calm urgency. "Everything all right?" Damien turned on him like a blade. "Who are you?" Ethan didn't flinch. "Her partner." The word struck Damien like a slap. "Partner?" he repeated, eyes narrowing. "In what sense?" "Every sense that matters," Ethan replied, stepping protectively beside Aubrey. For a brief second, something flashed in Damien's eyes, rage, jealousy, something darker before he turned back to Liam. The boy peeked around Aubrey's hip, curious but cautious. "What's your name, little man?" Damien asked, voice softening just enough to sound human again. Aubrey stiffened. "Don't talk to him." "I have a right to know," Damien said. "If he's mine." "He's not yours," she cut in sharply. Liam tugged her sleeve. "Mom? Who is that?" Her heart staggered. "Mom?" Her name from Liam's lips was a shield she wasn't ready to put down. Damien inhaled sharply at the word, and something inside him cracked. "Aubrey, you disappeared for years. You lied. You hid from me." "I protected my child," she replied. He stepped closer, voice low. "So he is mine." Aubrey's throat closed. She didn't answer. Her silence said enough. Damien's eyes widened. The floor seemed to shift beneath him, the weight of realization crashing down with terrifying force. "A son," he whispered. "You kept my son from me?" Aubrey's voice trembled, but she stood tall. You forfeited any right to him the night you threatened to destroy me if I kept my pregnancy. People were openly watching now. Phones lifted discreetly. Whispers spread like wildfire. Damien's mask fractured completely. I didn't mean. You did, she said. You meant every word. Liam pressed closer to her leg, sensing danger even if he didn't understand it. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Damien noticed. Don't touch her, he snapped. You don't give orders here, Ethan replied calmly. Security approached from the corner of the lobby, alerted by the rising tension. Damien's voice grew colder. Aubrey, you can't hide him anymore. If he's mine, I'm taking this to court. Ice slid through her veins. This was what she feared. The nightmare she'd been outrunning. Don't do this, she whispered. You stole my son, he hissed. And now the world will know. Suddenly, a deep voice behind them said, I think the world deserves to know something else too, Damien. All three turned. Standing there, watching with an expression carved from stone, was Richard Blackwood. The lobby of the Grand Summit fell into an eerie hush as Richard Blackwood stepped forward. His silver hair, sharp navy suit, and stern posture carried the weight of a man who had spent a lifetime commanding boardrooms. But his eyes, those cool, assessing blue eyes, were fixed solely on his son. Damien stiffened. Dad, this is not the place. Richard ignored him. His gaze shifted to Aubrey, then down to Liam, whose small fingers clutched the hem of her dress. Something softened briefly in the older man's expression, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a fierce, quiet resolve. Aubrey, Richard said with a curt nod. It's been a long time. She swallowed. Yes, sir. Thank you for watching. Damien stepped between them, his voice strained. Dad, stay out of this. This is a private matter. Richard's tone dropped, low and cutting. It stopped being private the moment you raised your voice in a lobby full of investors. Fiona, watching from across the room, went rigid. Cameras were subtly lifting, phones recording. The narrative was slipping from Damien's hands. Ethan stepped closer to Aubrey, subtly positioning himself between her and the growing circle of onlookers. Liam pressed against her leg, wide-eyed and confused. Richard turned to her again. Are you all right? She hesitated, torn between truth and the instinct to stay invisible. I'm fine, she whispered. No, Richard said. You're not. And you haven't been for a long time. Damien's temper snapped. Dad, you don't know anything about what happened between us. Richard slowly raised an eyebrow. I know enough. A heavy silence settled. Damien's jaw tightened. She kept my child from me. Exoper. Aubrey felt her breath catch. Even now, he twisted the story, painting himself as the victim. Richard looked at her gently. Is that true? Aubrey lifted her chin. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. I didn't keep Liam from a loving father. I kept him from a man who tried to force me into an abortion. A man who threatened me, controlled me, and made me fear for my child's safety. A murmur rippled through the nearby crowd. Damien's face flushed a dangerous red. You're lying. And Piso. Aubrey stepped forward, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. Did you not say you'd ruin me if I didn't handle the situation? Did you not book an appointment without asking me? Did you not tell me I'd be on my own if I kept the baby? His silence said everything. Richard inhaled sharply, fury igniting behind his eyes. Is this true? Damien sputtered. Dad, she's twisting. Answer the question, Richard barked. Damien froze. A father's disappointment carried more weight than any boardroom battle. Richard shook his head slowly. I raised you better than this. You didn't raise me at all, Damien exploded. You were too busy building your empire. Richard didn't flinch. And yet even I knew better than to treat a woman carrying my child like a problem to eliminate. The words struck harder than any physical blow. Aubrey blinked, stunned. She had expected Richard to take Damien's side. She had never imagined he would defend her, especially in public, in front of investors. Liam tugged her hand. Mommy, can we go home? Her throat tightened. Soon, baby. Damien's gaze sharpened at the word home, as though the concept itself was slipping beyond his reach. This isn't over, he said. If Liam is mine, I will go to court. I will get custody. Aubrey's heart nearly stopped. Ethan immediately stepped forward, voice low and fierce. You're not taking him. Bakshin. Damien laughed bitterly. Watch me. Richard held up a hand. Damien. His son turned. Richard's next words were quiet but lethal. Before you wage a war you can't win, you should know something. Damien frowned. What? Richard motioned toward Liam. I had a DNA test run. The lobby fell into a suspended silence. Even the hum of the escalator seemed to pause as Richard Blackwood's words echoed through the marble hall. I had a DNA test run. Aubrey froze. Ethan stiffened beside her. Damien's face drained of color, layering shock over confusion, then fury. You what? Damien snapped. You had no right. Richard cut him off. I had every right. I had suspicions the moment I saw the boy. A ripple of whispers passed through the surrounding crowd. Liam, oblivious to the political earthquake unfolding, stared curiously at the older man. Aubrey's heartbeat thundered. She had been careful, so careful. She'd avoided hospitals with shared databases. She'd declined optional genetic screenings. She'd used cash, aliases, vanished between coasts. How could Richard have? Then she remembered. The fever Liam had when he turned 5. The late-night clinic visit. The mouth swab the nurse had taken, just in case of bacterial strain. She had signed the form without thinking, exhausted and scared. Richard must have found a way to access it. Damien stepped closer, voice low and trembling with barely contained rage. You violated my privacy. You violated her privacy. Richard didn't blink. I protected my legacy, something you clearly failed to do. Damien's breath hitched. Ethan moved subtly in front of Aubrey, but Richard lifted a hand. She's not in danger from me. If anything, she's the only person in this mess who deserves the truth. Aubrey swallowed hard. What truth? Richard looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher, part guilt, part regret, part something else entirely. I know what my son is, he said quietly. I know the damage he's capable of, and I know the price women pay when they fall into the orbit of powerful men who never learned compassion. Aubrey felt tears sting her eyes. He wasn't wrong. Liam, Richard continued, voice softening a fraction, is indeed a Blackwood. Damien inhaled sharply. Richard added, which means he is my grandson, and the rightful heir to half the holdings I've built. The lobby erupted in murmurs. Damien staggered back as if struck. You're giving him what? He's a child. Exactly, Richard said. A child innocent of your cruelty. A child who deserves a future untouched by your ambition. Damien's fury burst free. You would choose her over your own son? After everything I've built? Richard's gaze hardened. You built on rot. I will not hand my legacy to a man who destroys what he cannot control. Aubrey's breath caught. Ethan placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Richard turned to her. I want to make you an offer. Damien barked a laugh. Oh, this should be good. But Richard ignored him. Aubrey, he said carefully, I want to establish a trust for Liam. Protected assets, education funds, medical coverage, and complete legal shielding from Damien's reach. Her chest tightened. Why? Why would you do that for us? Richard's voice lowered. Because I failed another woman once. Years ago. And I won't repeat that mistake. Damien's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Richard didn't answer. Instead, he faced Aubrey fully. You've spent years running, hiding, fighting alone, but you don't have to anymore. I can help you secure Liam's future permanently. Aubrey shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know if I can trust you. That's fair, Richard said gently. Trust is earned. I can start now. She hesitated. Ethan squeezed her hand, whispering, hear him out. Richard extended a small envelope. Heavy. Official-looking. This contains the first draft of the trust. Reviewed by my attorneys. You won't owe me anything. And Damien won't have access to a single cent. Damien lunged forward. You can't cut me out of my own son's life. Richard turned, voice icy. You forfeited your place when you tried to erase him before he was born. Damien flinched. Aubrey's hands trembled as she stared at the envelope. Inside it was protection, a lifeline, a future. But as she reached for it, a new voice echoed across the lobby. Miss Hall? Miss Aubrey Hall? All heads turned. A woman in a navy suit stood at the check-in desk, holding a legal folder. I'm here on behalf of Child Protective Services, she announced. We received a report about a potentially endangered child. Aubrey's stomach dropped. The report was filed under one name, Damien Blackwood. The lobby's golden glow turned cold as the CPS agent stepped forward. Aubrey's stomach twisted violently, her arms instinctively pulling Liam closer. The little boy looked up at her, confused by the sudden tension, his small fingers curling into her sweater. "Ma'am," the agent said gently, "we received an anonymous report that your child may be in danger. We're required to investigate immediately." Anonymous, except nothing about it was anonymous. Damien's eyes gleamed with triumph. Aubrey felt the floor tilt. "He's safe," she whispered. "My son is safe. Please, there's been a misunderstanding." Damien stepped forward with a mask of false concern. "I'm worried about the environment she's raising him in. She disappeared for years, severed contact, and now she's associating with questionable individuals. I had no choice but to notify the proper authorities." Aubrey nearly choked on her breath. "You did this? How dare?" Richard cut in sharply. "You went too far." But Damien ignored him, addressing the agent with calm authority. "I'm willing to cooperate fully. I'll even take temporary custody until this is resolved." Aubrey's entire body went cold. Temporary custody. Those two words were execution. Ethan stepped between them. "You're not taking Liam anywhere." The agent raised a hand. "Let's all stay calm. Miss Hall, I just need to verify the child's welfare. We can do that privately if you prefer." Aubrey nodded shakily. "Yes, please." "If you didn't." The agent guided her a few steps away while Liam clung to her, burying his face against her shoulder. She whispered soothing words, but her mind was unraveling. Damien had predicted this, planned this. A CPS case, even a temporary one, could destroy everything: her safety, her credibility, even the future of Bluestone Finance. Richard watched them go, jaw tight with fury. "Are you satisfied?" he hissed at Damien. "Terrifying your own son?" "He's not my son until I say he is," Damien snapped. "And if she thinks she can walk back into public life and parade him around..." Richard stepped closer, his voice dropping into something deadly. "Say one more word, and I'll ensure you never inherit a single cent of the Blackwood estate." Damien opened his mouth, but Richard raised a finger, silencing him like a child. "You harmed that woman. You threatened her. And if I'm not mistaken, you submitted a fraudulent CPS report, which is a criminal offense." The color drained from Damien's face. But before he could respond, Richard turned away from him entirely toward Ethan. "Ethan," he said quietly, "follow me." Ethan hesitated, then glanced at Aubrey, still being questioned softly by the agent. Her face was pale, trembling, but full of fire. He nodded once and followed Richard to a private alcove near the conference hall. Richard didn't mince words. "I'm going to protect that woman and her son, but I need your cooperation." "No question," Ethan said. Richard studied him. "You care for her." Ethan didn't pretend otherwise. "Yes, very much." "Then you'll understand what's at stake. Damien will try every legal trick in the book. Custody filings, public narratives, smear campaigns. He'll scorch the earth before he lets her win." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then we beat him with truth." Richard actually smiled, a small, grim curve of his lips. "Exactly. And truth is something my son has never learned to manage well." He reached into his jacket and handed Ethan a flash drive. "This contains internal communications, financial documents, and personal messages Damien hoped would never see daylight. Enough to expose his misconduct, his coercion, and his lies." Ethan's eyes widened. "Why give this to me?" "Because," Richard said, "if I release it, it looks like a family feud. If you release it through Bluestone Finance, it becomes public accountability." Ethan swallowed. This could ruin him. Richard's gaze didn't waver. He ruined himself. They turned as the CPS agent approached again, this time with a different expression. Concern. Confusion. Urgency. "Miss Hall?" she called. "I need to speak with you immediately." Aubrey stood very still. The agent lifted a paper. "I just received new information, and the report may have been altered. If wonder tenor." Ethan and Richard exchanged a sharp look. Then the agent said the words that made Aubrey's knees nearly buckle. "It appears someone else filed a second report, this one accusing Damien Blackwood of endangering the child." For a moment, it felt like the entire Grand Summit stopped breathing. The CPS agent's voice echoed across the marble floor as she held up the second report. "This allegation was filed early this morning," she said, "and it directly contradicts the first one. It claims Mr. Blackwood created a threatening environment for both mother and child. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Damien's face drained of color. What? That's absurd. Who would? Richard spoke before he could finish. Someone who finally decided to stop enabling your behavior. Damien stared at him. You did this? You filed a report against your own son? I filed a report, Richard said calmly, against a man who endangered a woman under his care and tried to erase his own child. N10. The room erupted in whispers. Cameras began to angle discreetly. Journalists moved closer. Investors exchanged stunned looks. The perfect image Damien had curated for years, the untouchable CEO, the clean brand, the disciplined visionary, was cracking in real time. Aubrey held Liam close, standing beside Ethan, feeling equal parts terrified and vindicated. She hadn't wanted a scene. She hadn't wanted revenge. But seeing Damien cornered, forced to face truth instead of hiding behind lawyers and money, sent a trembling rush of relief through her chest. The CPS agent cleared her throat. Given the conflicting reports, we will be launching a full investigation. That includes interviews, home assessments. Damien snapped. I'm not letting you investigate me like some criminal. That is not your decision, she replied. Richard stepped toward him. Son, stop before you make this worse. I quote. Damien rounded on him, rage blazing in his eyes. You betrayed me. After everything I've built, everything I've done for this family, you side with her? Richard didn't flinch. I'm siding with the truth. The truth? Damien spat. The truth is, she ran off with my child. She lied. She hid from me for years, and now she shows up with some tech nerd and expects sympathy. Ethan stepped forward, voice calm but edged with steel. Careful. What are you going to do? Damien barked. Hack my email? Post a blog? You think you're in my league? Ethan didn't move, didn't raise his voice. I don't have to be in your league to expose what you've done. Damien laughed sharp, disbelieving, but something in his expression faltered. Fear. Real fear. Because deep down, he knew Bluestone Finance had grown powerful, respected, and watched. And because he knew Ethan wasn't bluffing. The CPS agent interrupted. Mr. Blackwood, you will need to comply with the investigation, and Miss Hall, please remain available for follow-up. Aubrey nodded, breath unsteady. Liam pressed his face into her shoulder, overwhelmed. Then Richard raised his voice just enough to be heard across the lobby. This ends today. Everyone turned toward him. I will be withdrawing my financial backing from Blackwood Capital immediately, he announced. Effective now. A long, stunned silence followed. Even Fiona looked shocked, hand flying to her mouth. Damien's voice cracked. Dad, you can't. Not now. I can, Richard said. And I will. The board will receive the paperwork within the hour. Without my support, the IPO stalls. And without my signature, you lose voting control. Investors exchanged glances of panic. A few stepped away from Damien entirely, distancing themselves from a sinking ship. You ruined everything, Damien whispered, horrified. No, Richard replied evenly. You ruined everything when you chose power over humanity. Aubrey felt her throat tighten. She hadn't wanted Richard to destroy his own son, but she couldn't deny the justice in his words. Damien looked around wildly, chest heaving, sweat gathering at his temple. His empire was collapsing. His father had turned against him. His lies were unraveling publicly. And the boy he tried to erase was standing 10 feet away. Fiona suddenly stepped up, voice trembling. Damien, we need to talk, privately. But Damien didn't hear her. His eyes had fixed on Liam wide, innocent, watchful. And then, in a voice hollow with disbelief, he whispered, He really is mine, isn't he? Security escorted the growing crowd away from the lobby, but the damage had already been done. Dozens of cameras had filmed Damien's outburst. Investors had heard every word. Rumors were already slipping through the conference hall like cracks in ice. Still, Damien was too consumed to notice. His gaze was locked on Liam, as if the child were the last thread holding his world together, and simultaneously the reason it was unraveling. Richard motioned toward a private conference room. We finish this inside, now. Reluctantly, Damien followed. Aubrey hesitated until Ethan whispered, You're not facing him alone anymore. She nodded and stepped inside, with Liam perched on her lap, protective arms wrapped around him. The door shut behind them. Silence pressed against the room like a second set of walls. Richard spoke first. Damien, you're spiraling. You've crossed legal and moral lines. Damien let out a hollow laugh. Moral lines? Don't lecture me about morals. Not when she, he pointed at Aubrey, stole my child. Aubrey met his stare evenly. I didn't steal anything. I escaped. You ran, he hissed. I survived. Her voice carried a quiet fury he wasn't prepared for. Damien blinked, stunned by the steel in her tone. Richard leaned forward. You drove her away. You threatened her. You used your power to trap her. That's not fatherhood, Damien. That's coercion. Ethan's voice joined, low and dangerous. And filing a false CPS report? That's criminal. Damien's facade fractured. I was trying to protect my son. By taking him from his mother? Ethan shot back. Damien's hands balled into fists. She had no right to disappear with him. I deserved. Aubrey cut in sharply. You deserved nothing. He takes sport. He flinched. She continued, voice trembling but unbroken. The night I told you I was pregnant, you didn't see a child. You saw a threat. You told me to handle it. You told me I'd regret keeping him. You made me choose between my baby and my safety. Her words struck the room like stones. Even Richard looked pained. Damien swallowed hard, anger giving way to something more fragile, panic. I didn't mean it like that. You did, she whispered, and you didn't stop. Not then. Not now. Silence? Liam shifted in her lap, sensing the heaviness. Aubrey kissed the top of his head, grounding herself. She was no longer the terrified woman hiding behind kitchen counters. She was a mother, a survivor, and she had allies now. Damien raked a hand through his hair, pacing. Okay. Fine. Maybe I made mistakes, but I can fix this. We can work something out. Joint custody, supervised visitation. No, Aubrey said instantly. He froze. No? You don't get to negotiate terms like, this is a business asset. He's a child, my child, and until a court tells me otherwise, you have no place in his life. Damien's expression darkened. A court will side with me. For once in your life, Richard said quietly, you're wrong. Damien spun on him. You think you can buy her loyalty by offering a trust? You think you can erase me? I don't need to erase you, Richard replied. You're doing that all on your own. If you wanna. The words hit Damien harder than any public humiliation. Richard continued, your company is collapsing. Your investors are fleeing. Regulators will be at your door by morning. And when Ethan publishes what I've given him, Damien stiffened. Publishes what? Ethan met his gaze with unwavering calm. Your emails, your internal memos, your threats, everything you never thought would see the light. The color drained from Damien's face. You wouldn't. I would, Ethan said. Aubrey exhaled shakily. She didn't relish destroying him, but she needed to protect Liam, and if exposing Damien was the only way to end the nightmare, then so be it. Damien turned desperate. Aubrey, don't let them do this. I can be better. I can change. I just need. He stopped mid-sentence. His phone buzzed. Once, twice. He glanced down, expecting a message from PR or legal. But when he saw the notification, the last bit of color drained from his face. His voice came out hollow. My board just voted to suspend me. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, an aroma of justice, or perhaps of memory. Aubrey sat at the plaintiff's table, Liam beside her drawing quietly with crayons Ethan had brought to keep him calm. Her hands trembled beneath the table, but her spine stayed straight. She'd come too far to crumble now. Across the aisle, Damien Blackwood sat rigid, jaw clenched so tightly a muscle ticked beneath his cheek. He looked smaller than she remembered, like his tailored suit no longer fit, like the confidence he once wore, like armor had been stripped away. His lawyers surrounded him, whispering rapid-fire strategies, but even they looked uneasy. The judge entered, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. This was it. The day she had feared, the day she had prayed for. The day she would finally tell the truth in a room where Damien's power meant nothing. Miss Hall, the judge began. You may present your opening statement. Aubrey rose slowly. Her knees wobbled, but her voice didn't. Your Honor, she began, I never wanted to be here. I never wanted a legal battle. I only wanted to protect my son. She gestured gently to Liam, who was coloring a bright blue house. When I learned I was pregnant, Mr. Blackwood did not celebrate. He did not support me. He threatened me. He told me to end the pregnancy. He booked appointments behind my back. He made me fear for my safety and my child's safety. And when I refused, he promised to make sure I regretted it. A hush swept over the room. Damien's lawyer shot up. Objection, character defamation. The judge lifted a hand. Overruled. Continue, Miss Hall. Tears welled, but Aubrey didn't break. I left because I was afraid. I left because he treated my baby like a liability, not a life. And when he finally found us years later, he filed a false CPS report to try to take Liam from me. Thanks for watching. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge turned to Damien. Mr. Blackwood, is this true? His lawyer stammered. Your Honor, the CPS report was an act of concern. Richard Blackwood suddenly stood. It was a lie, he said, voice steady, echoing across the room. My son submitted that report out of spite, not concern. A wave of shock crashed over the courtroom. The judge narrowed his eyes. And you know this because? Richard lifted a folder. Because I obtained the original call log and transcript, and because I filed a counter-report documenting his threats. Damien whipped toward his father, betrayal etched deep. You did what? Richard didn't blink. I did the right thing. Damien's composure cracked. You're ruining me. For her? For your son, Richard corrected. The one you tried to erase before he was born. Ethan placed a steady hand on Aubrey's back. She exhaled shakily, gratitude swelling through her. The judge turned stern eyes to Damien. Given the evidence, the threats, the conflicting reports, and the documented pattern of coercive behavior, this court must prioritize the welfare of the child. Damien's face twisted with panic. Your Honor, please, Liam is my son. Biologically, the judge said, but legal parentage must consider more than biology. It considers who protected him, who nurtured him, who put his safety above pride and ambition. The judge lifted his gavel. Custody of the child, Liam Hall, is awarded solely to his mother, Miss Aubrey Hall. Mr. Blackwood will have no visitation rights until he completes mandated therapy, parenting courses, and undergoes a full psychological evaluation. Damien's knees buckled. His lawyers froze. Aubrey covered her mouth, tears bursting free. Liam looked up from his drawing. Mommy, why are you crying? She gathered him into her arms. Happy tears, sweetheart. Damien slammed both palms on the table. No, you can't do this to me. The judge lifted his voice. Order. But Damien wasn't done. He pointed at Aubrey, wild-eyed. You think you've won? You think this ends here? I still have influence. I still have power. He didn't finish. The courtroom doors swung open. A federal agent stepped inside, badge gleaming. Damien Blackwood, the agent announced. You're under investigation for financial misconduct, falsification of corporate disclosures, and obstruction. Please come with us. Is red an X? Damien went white. And for the first time, Aubrey watched him understand what true consequences felt like. The months after Damien Blackwood's fall were strangely quiet, like the world had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. The headlines told the story in cold, crisp language: regulatory raid, securities, fraud probe, CEO removed, IPO cancelled. But those were just echoes of a larger truth. For the first time in nearly a decade, Aubrey Hall wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't surviving. She was living. Bluestone Finance found a modest but beautiful office overlooking San Francisco Bay, a sunlit space with wide windows and second-hand desks that Ethan insisted on fixing himself. Liam had a small corner filled with books, crayons, and a globe he spun whenever he wanted to pick a new adventure place. Aubrey would walk into the office each morning holding Liam's hand, greeting their tiny team with a smile that grew more natural every day. She was no longer the frightened woman who hid behind clinic doors and took trains in the dead of night. She was a founder now. A mother. A woman rebuilt from ashes. One afternoon, as sunlight poured across the open floor, Ethan placed a cup of warm coffee on her desk. Big day tomorrow, he teased. Aubrey smiled. First time Bluestone is presenting on national media. He nodded. And the first time your name gets to stand on its own. If you unwise. She looked down at the stack of notes in front of her, then at Liam coloring dinosaurs with absolute focus. It took a long time to get here. It was worth it, Ethan said softly. She met his eyes, and in that moment, something warm and steady passed between them. Something that had been building quietly for years, beneath fear, beneath struggle, beneath survival. Before she could speak, her assistant knocked gently. "Miss Hall? Mr. Blackwood is here." Aubrey stiffened. "Which one?" she asked. "Richard." Relief washed through her. Richard Blackwood entered with a slow, purposeful gait. Time had softened him, but his presence was still commanding. He removed his hat, offered a faint smile, and knelt beside Liam first. "Hello, young man," he said warmly. "Still drawing dinosaurs?" Liam nodded. "I made this one breathe fire." Richard chuckled. "Good. The world needs brave creatures." Then he turned to Aubrey. "I signed the final trust papers," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. "It's done. Liam is fully protected. His future is secure financially and legally." Aubrey's throat tightened. "Thank you. For everything." Richard shook his head. "No, thank you. You gave this family a chance to correct old sins." There was pain behind his eyes, a lifetime of regrets tied to one broken son. But there was pride too. Redemption, perhaps. As Richard left, he paused beside Ethan. "She'll need someone steady beside her," he murmured. Ethan nodded. "I intend to be." When the door closed, Aubrey turned to him. "What did he say?" Ethan shrugged. "That you need someone steady." "And are you?" she asked quietly. He stepped closer, voice gentle. "I want to be, if you'll let me." Aubrey's breath trembled. Years of fear had built walls around her heart, but Ethan had been chipping at them, one act of kindness at a time. And for once, she didn't feel afraid of choosing. "I think I'm ready," she whispered. Ethan smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. Liam looked up. "Mommy, is Ethan staying for dinner?" Aubrey laughed softly. "Yes, sweetheart. I think he is." As evening light spilled across the office, she looked out at the shimmering bay, the same waters she once stood beside as a terrified young mother. Now shining before her was a life she had built with her own strength. A life Damien could never touch. A life rooted not in survival, but in hope. And as Liam wrapped his small arms around her waist, Aubrey finally understood. She had not only escaped the darkness, she had turned it into light. So, this is where our story closes, my wonderful friends. And if you're still here with me right now, that means something in this journey touched your heart in its own quiet way. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength, or maybe of a moment you thought you wouldn't survive. You know, the Stoics used to say, the obstacle is the way, meaning every pain, every heartbreak, every betrayal can become the doorway to a stronger version of ourselves. Aubrey's story is proof of that. She didn't win because life became easier, she won because she chose not to be broken. And maybe that's the message for all of us tonight. You are allowed to walk away from what hurts, you are allowed to protect your peace, and you are capable of rebuilding, no matter how dark it gets. As Marcus Aurelius said, what stands in the way becomes the way. If this story gave you even a little bit of hope, or a little breath of courage, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but so we can keep walking through these stories together, stronger, wiser, and never alone.